How and what to prepare for if you're an urban prepper. Hey everybody, this is Michael with Asymmetrical Preparedness. There are a lot more challenges to prepping if you live urban, high population dense areas like cities, larger towns. There's a lot more threats, a lot more things to think about, a lot more reliance on the system. So I'm going to cover 12 things that I wrote down as potential challenges, and then we're going to talk about the 12 solutions or the ideas that I came up with that may help mitigate those challenges and may allow you to survive. But before I get into the video, please subscribe, ring the notification bell for all, hit that thumbs up or the thumbs down, whatever you feel like. Share the videos and comment below. We're having great comments in the comment section. I love you guys. Also, one thing of note, that one that looks like my logo and it has a bunch of numbers next to it, says text and congratulations you won, that's a scammer. I'm trying to get rid of them. Moderators, feel free to delete those and report them if you can. I've been reporting them, hiding them from the channel. So anyway, let's get on with the video. As I mentioned, there are unique challenges for urban preppers, for city prepping. Okay, so what's the first one I came up with? These aren't in any particular order. The first one I wrote down is population density, meaning threats. More threats out there in cities because there's more people. When SHTF happens and people aren't able to get food, you're going to have a lot more people in a smaller area that will be starving, that will be hurting, that will be angry, frustrated, mad, all these different things. So you have a lot higher potential for threats against you and your family and people going around trying to take from others. So that's threat number one. I meant to say challenge number one, not threat number one. Okay, so that's a viable one. And like I said, we're going to talk about the solutions to them also. But first I want to cover the challenges I talked about. Challenge number two, controlled access and or egress, meaning the ways to get into cities and to get out of cities are much easier to control because there's a limited number of roads going into a city. A lot of times there's bridges, and then you have to deal with the gridlock if you're talking about like an EMP situation or things like that. We're going to talk about a little more of those kind of things in detail a little bit later in the video, but there's challenges surrounding that, about being able to get out, predominantly get out of the city. I'm not really worried about getting into cities in an SHTF scenario, because who would want to get into a city in an SHTF scenario? So that's challenge number two. Challenge number three has to do with this kind of stuff. In a urban environment, typically, and I get it, not across the board, but typically people are consumers, not producers, meaning people are not growing their own food and or raising their own animals. So you don't have that like rural. Rural people, farms, ranches all over the place. People have chickens, outdoor gardens, all kinds of stuff. You see it all the time when you go rural. And I'm not saying everybody rural doesn't do that. And everybody in the city also doesn't do it. Some people in the city are able to do this kind of stuff, and we have some unique solutions to this one later on. So stay tuned for that. Limited supplies and or empty shelves. A lot of people, I've heard comments before about people that live urban in a city, and they say, oh, there's so many more grocery stores in the city, so we'll be fine. Warehouses, stuff like that. But they're not thinking about how many people those grocery stores serve and how many people will be going to those grocery stores and other places to get supplies in an SHTF scenario. It really doesn't matter whether you're rural or urban. I think none of the stores really anywhere will be lasting more than 2 to 4 days maybe-ish. Maybe in some areas 5 if people, are really rural and, the small little country store or something like that where people don't go there very often, maybe a little bit longer. But that is a challenge. Limited supplies and empty stores, which there's not many solutions for that, but we will also cover that. Here's one I feel is another viable concern for people that live in the city, and that is room to store your stuff. Houses in cities, apartments, such like that tend to be, not always the case, but tend to be smaller. People live in smaller dwellings. The houses are stacked up on top of each other, even in the areas where there are houses versus high-rise type apartment buildings, etc. Duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, whatever the living situation is. Tends to be, space is at a premium in cities. I mean, that just is what it is. But I have some unique solutions for that coming up. This one is kind of like I showed you over there by my raised bed, is lack of area to garden and or raise animals. Some of it has to do with HOAs. The agreements in saying that you can't have gardens or you can't have such and such, all the rules and regulations that come along with city life. There's a lot more of them than there is in rural life. So the challenges, one of the challenges is of living in a city is area to garden and or raise animals. Even if you live in a house, say you have, a small front yard, small backyard, you're still a lot more limited than say maybe somebody living on an acre, 2 or 20 in a rural area. So I got some solutions for this also. Urban areas are more susceptible to an EMP, meaning there's a lot more electronics, a lot more electricity, a lot more grid-related stuff in a city versus rural. Also, there's a lot more, the higher population dense areas are going to be more juicy threats for things like high altitude nuclear yield device setting off an EMP. They're not necessarily going to target, middle America, small towns. Targeted areas for any kind of strike will be larger cities, which I will also get into in just a moment. I mentioned we'll get into it. So larger target, meaning if we end up in like a nuclear war or something like that, nobody's going to launch nukes into some, podunk nowhere up in the mountains, rural area. They're just not. They're going to target cities. But like I said before, I have some solutions for that that will definitely help you maybe survive it. Here's another good one. This is the ability to get out of the cities when the roads are blocked. Because all the vehicles in a city, and if you got all those people trying to leave the city, we've seen examples of that before in other countries, predominantly. But yeah, it'll be gridlocked. It'll be very difficult to get out. But yes, pretty soon we'll talk about some solutions, because I don't want to just talk about challenges and problems. I'm solution-based. I want to empower you guys to be ready for this. All right, these next couple I'm just going to cover as a group. Challenges are city water. You're on city water versus a well, probably in a city. You're also on city sewer versus septic. And you have lack of alternative heating, meaning most places in the city, most houses don't have wood stoves. So those are the 12 challenges I've come up with so far. So now let's talk about solutions. Okay, the first solution correlates to the first challenge, which was population density and threats. There are some things you can do. They're not perfect. None of these solutions are perfect, that's for sure. Just like in prepping, nothing is really perfect. It all depends on the situation and a lot of things going on. So, security systems for your house, for your property, whether they be motion detectors, lights, bars, locks, reinforced door frames, ballistic windows. It runs a gamut of a lot of different things. You can do things to help you be a little more secure in your urban environment, as well as practicing with, training with, being intimately familiar with, and very, very effective with defensive tools and the associated equipment. So those are some things that you can do, but in a city, you're going to be dealing with a very high number of threats. So another thing that I didn't write down actually, but just popped in my mind with this is tribe, your mutual assistance group. Even if you live in a city, you might be able to build a mutual assistance group within the city. What you can do then is you can gather at the most strategically advantageous location of your tribe members, who lives in the most defensible situation. And then you can gather there, do your best, or look at other options like getting out. Okay, number 2 challenge and number 2 solution, controlled access egress, meaning your ability to get in and out of cities. Well, the best way to deal with that is to first be aware of what's going on around you, so that maybe you will have a heads up in a timely manner, allowing you to get out of the city before all those roads are choked up, before they're all blocked with everybody else trying to get out, and or have alternate methods of transportation. A bicycle, an e-bike, a motorcycle, a dirt bike, something like that along those lines. Or maybe even walking out. That is an option. You may have to walk out. So fitness is key here. Fitness is key for all preppers. But in a situation like that, you're going to have to bug out on foot for over long distances. Fitness is key. Let's talk about consumers, not producers, like I'm showing you behind me in my raised beds. These are putting all of our organic material in them to get ready to put to bed. Not done, I still got a lot of work to do. But, so consumers, not producers. So what are some solutions to that? Well, one solution would be to stockpile lots of food. If you don't have the ability to produce your own food, then stockpile a lot of it, and other supplies also. As well as another solution would be to tribe with people more rural, so that you can go there in a bad situation, where maybe they have the ability to grow their own food, raise their own animals, etc. Tribe is important. Tribe will definitely allow you to have a much better chance of surviving all this stuff. So stockpiling food, tribe with people more rural, and while I'm here I'll cover number 4, which is similar, which is limited supplies and empty shelves. Same thing, stockpile, tribe with people that know and or have the ability to garden, raise their own animals, stuff like that. As well as something I didn't write down but it just popped in my mind, having the ability to, and knowledge and skills to hunt, fish, trap, snare, and forage for your own food. Now that's not the answer though necessarily long term, because everybody else is going to be trying to do that also. So maybe short term, yes. Maybe as part of your solution, yes, it's very important. Have your food stockpile. Have your skill sets to be able to do that and the equipment necessary to do those things, and the ability to grow your own food. Very important. Okay, challenge number 5 would be the room to store your stuff. All right, I do have some good input on this, I think. First is use your imagination. Find places in your house, apartment, whatever it may be, to store stuff. We have a king-size bed, and underneath it, we have a whole bunch of totes. We don't have a bed frame. What we do is we have a bunch of totes down there full of food. I laid plywood on top of it, put our mattress on top of that, bam, good to go. Works out. You may be able to find space above cabinets, find space in the back of closets, maybe an attic, maybe a crawl space. Lots of different places. Use your imagination. Maybe you make a coffee table out of it, drape it over with something that looks nice and pretty. People won't even know what's underneath there. All right, also storage units. You can look into storage units. I don't really like the idea. It's not the best, because if you're trying to get out quick, maybe have a storage unit. Actually, here's a good one. I didn't even think about that. Maybe have a storage unit in a rural town that's close to where you live, that you can have access to once you get out of the city, before moving more rural or wherever it is that you need to go or that you'll end up. Talked about, tribe and rural areas also. Stockpile store stuff at their locations, maybe, and or caches that are outside of the city. Try doing them in different locations, in like one of the 4 cardinal directions or whatever, some version of that. So you could cache your stuff. Also, you can stockpile your stuff and or store your stuff at your fairly or very rural bug out location. That's another solution to that. Areas to garden and or raise animals. You might still be able to do it. Indoor gardening, look up indoor gardening. Learn to grow with grow lamps, hydroponics, aquaponics. There's different ways to do it. Maybe you have a porch. Maybe you have a little bit of a yard. Maybe you have a veranda that you could put pots out on, or grow bags, things like that. Maybe you live in an apartment building where you have access to the roof. Maybe you could work together with the people that live in your apartment building and talk to the owners and maybe get access to and the ability to, the permission to start a rooftop garden. That might be a good option. I'm not sure if you're able to do that, but also community gardens. Even if you're in cities, there still are green belts. There are still areas where they're green. Check into community gardens to see if they exist and or if you have the ability to start one. Okay, the susceptibility to EMP. That's what I want to talk about next. Well, we all know about Faraday cages. Hopefully you know about Faraday cages. You can use Faraday cages for your personal stuff. But I was more thinking about the stuff that affects the city as a whole and or other people in the city. So having an older vehicle, an EMP-proof vehicle, maybe to get out of the city. Dirt bikes. I don't think any dirt bikes have electronics on them. I could be wrong, but check out dirt bikes or older motorcycles or bicycles and or e-bikes as long as they're not susceptible to EMP. So that's a good one. All right, so that was susceptible to EMP. Okay, I'm going to cover two here. Larger target. Okay, so with that, it's all about intelligence, situational awareness, those kind of things. Be aware of what's going on. Watch realistic and honest, real news sources, if any of them still exist, so that you know what is going on in the world around you, so you have at least the most heads up you possibly can prior to something big happening, so that you can get out ahead of everybody else. That's very important. Yeah, getting out prior to the strike. All right, so we'll go on to number 9, the ability to get out and roads blocked. We kind of go back to that. We talked about, so the solution to be bicycle, e-bike, motorcycle, dirt bike, and timing. Get out early. Get out before everybody else tries to. City water versus a well. You're reliant upon them pumping water to your house, which leaves you vulnerable. So what can you do about it? Well, you might be able to do rainwater catchment, depending on the time of year, depending on where you are and whether or not you're allowed to do that or not, or whether you're within a rule of law or not. Also, stockpiling water. Water is one of those things, though, you'd be looking at needing to get out if you lost water, because you have to have water. You can only stockpile so much. But also knowing alternate sources of where water is. Where are office buildings with those water coolers? Where is the town water reservoir? The water, or the lakes, streams, rivers, all those kind of things. Alternate sources of water can be very important and very advantageous in this situation. City sewer versus septic. Composting toilets could be a solution to that. Or like a 5-gallon bucket, 7-gallon bucket. You can get one of those little camp toilet lids that just clips on the top of the bucket. Line it with a trash bag, do your stuff, and then get rid of it. But you still have to have somewhere to get rid of it. What would you do with it? In a city? Toss it out the window? I don't know about that. But yes, composting toilets, buckets, and bags. So have lots of bags on hand in that situation. And or anybody, this applies to rural also. Or if you live on property, you could just dump your bucket out in the woods somewhere. Or dig a hole somewhere. If you have any kind of yard or something like that, you can do that. You can build an expedient outhouse, stuff like that. And the last one I might as well cover while I'm here also, lack of alternate heating and wood stoves. All right, so how do you keep warm without a source of heat? Blankets, proper clothing. There's also radiant heaters that you use a candle in like a ceramic pot that you can make that will, I'm not saying keep you super hot, but it may keep you warm enough to survive. And look at alternate sources of heating. There are other alternate sources of heating also out there. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I think it's important to talk about these kind of things. There's probably many more challenges to urban prepping than I wrote down. I'm not an urban prepper, but I still think this is good information here. And I hope my solutions were good, and I hope you appreciate them. Let me know what you guys think, or any other solutions that you came up with. I can't think of everything. I brain fart stuff all the time, or maybe I just don't even know about it. So put in the comments section any solutions you have to these challenges and or any other challenges. Have a communication, have a conversation with others in the chat to help other people more, to empower and uplift them. I love you guys. Have a wonderful day, and blessings to you and yours.